Boa tarde a todos. Boa tarde, doutor Jared. É um prazer estar aqui nessa tarde, né, podendo dar início aí às comemorações da Semana Profissional de Saúde da IDOR. É uma honra, como enfermeira, poder fazer aí a abertura dessa semana, trazendo essa webinar, que tenho certeza que vai ser muito proveitosa aqui, com, né, discussões riquíssimas entre nós. E aproveito inicialmente para agradecer toda a comissão organizadora, doutora Lideia Lima, diretora assistencial de qualidade, que estamos representando hoje aqui, né, minha pessoa, Ana Cláudia, doutor Rodrigo, representando aí nossa equipe da qualidade corporativa, Fabiana e a Natália. Também quero agradecer ao apoio do IDOR, né, que está sempre aí conosco nesses eventos, a Fabrícia Louro na comissão, também representando toda a enfermagem da empresa, o time do marketing dos recursos humanos, que são sempre nossos parceiros aí em todos esses eventos que organizamos. Essa é uma semana muito especial para todos nós, começando hoje no Dia do Enfermeiro, né? Mas é uma semana comemorativa que vamos celebrar aí a importância de todos os nossos colaboradores na entrega aí de um serviço de qualidade a todos os nossos pacientes. A companhia sabe da importância de um corpo, né, clínico aí diferenciado, em especial da enfermagem, toda a equipe multi e todos os seus colaboradores aí no apoio. A gente traz aqui a fala da enfermagem, entendendo aí seu maior volume, mas aqui a comemoração é de todo o corpo funcional, que traz aí, de alguma forma, uma entrega de qualidade para os nossos pacientes. E esse ano também, trazendo aí para vocês, a empresa está inaugurando a Faculdade de Enfermagem. Então, é um marco, né, na nossa instituição aí e para a enfermagem. Essa faculdade vai iniciar lá no Rio de Janeiro, mas eu tenho certeza que, aos poucos, teremos aí em vários estados um elo aí dessa graduação. Nesse ano, vamos trabalhar o tema, né, da liderança, entendendo aí o papel de todos nós, não só dos líderes aí formais com seus cargos, mas que cada profissional aí traz, né, nas suas atitudes do dia a dia, no cuidado, né, e a gente precisa despertar. Nós, como lideranças e gestores, precisamos envolver todo mundo aí, entendendo o papel de cada um, valorizando e despertando aí nos nossos colaboradores esse olhar. E identificar, né, dentro das suas experiências, quais são aí oportunidades de desenvolver novos trabalhos, melhorar a cultura de segurança e apoiar sempre aí no desempenho dessas equipes. Também organizamos, além dessa webinar, né, temos aí uma semana com atividades, as instituições terão atividades locais, cada uma organizou aí as suas ações. Do ponto de vista aí nacional, nós estamos fazendo um concurso de fotografia, já é o segundo ano que a gente faz esse concurso, o primeiro ano foi um sucesso, esse ano a gente está trazendo aí uma repaginada, o concurso de vinhos detalhes, em todos os colaboradores e parceiros, eles podem aí se inscrever e trazer as suas experiências. E hoje vamos começar a trabalhar aí com a webinar, né, nesse tema de liderança na segurança do paciente, onde estamos e para onde vamos, né, um momento de reflexão que a gente faz aí por todo essa vivência nossa nesses 2 anos de pandemia, e agora nessa grande retomada, entendendo aí todos os aspectos que impactaram aí na segurança do paciente, e a gente precisa despertar para isso. Em nome da Diretoria de Qualidade da Rede IDOR, já quero agradecer antecipadamente ao Dr. Jared por aceitar o nosso convite, né, com muito carinho aí, vir falar para a gente aqui da sua experiência, e acredito que será uma tarde de muita troca e aprendizado. Passo a palavra agora para o Dr. Rodrigo, que vai conduzir aí com o Dr. Jared essa webinar.
Muito obrigado, Ana. Uma boa tarde a todos. Queria agradecer a todos também a oportunidade de estar participando desse webinar. Com certeza vai ser muito proveitoso. E eu vou falar agora algumas palavras para o Dr. Jarrett. Antecipadamente, eu queria só dar algumas orientações a vocês a respeito de como vai ser a aula. A gente vai ter, primeiro, uma apresentação expositiva do Dr. Jarrett. E quando vocês tiverem qualquer dúvida, qualquer pergunta, a gente tem um íconezinho que é Q&A, é o Q e o A, aqui embaixo. Então, as perguntas elas podem ser direcionadas nesse ícone, por favor, tá bom? Não vamos colocar as perguntas no chat, senão a gente vai acabar sem ver as perguntas de vocês. E se vocês tiverem qualquer dificuldade em ouvir o Dr. Jarrett na língua original, em inglês, a gente também tem um ícone embaixo, que é o ícone de interpretação, que tem um logozinho de um globo terrestre. Vocês podem clicar nesse ícone no canal português embaixo, tá bom? Quando vocês estiverem no canal português, vocês vão ser capazes de ouvir a tradução simultânea do inglês para o português. Se vocês quiserem permanecer na língua original, é só deixar no off e aí o canal não vai ser adaptado, tá bom? Então, eu queria apresentar para vocês primeiro, antes de falar algumas palavras, vou apresentar o Dr. Mark Jarrett, que ele é do estado de Nova York. Ele é doutor em medicina, né, mestre em ciências, ele também tem um título de praticante de privacidade e segurança da informação em saúde do paciente. Tá? Atualmente, ele exerce a função de conselheiro sênior de saúde para Northwell Health, que é o maior provedor privado de saúde do estado de Nova York, e é professor de medicina na escola Donald e Barbara Zucker, em Hofstra, Northwell, também no estado de Nova York. Ele é vice-presidente do Conselho de Coordenação em Saúde Pública e chefe do setor nacional de saúde para a Infragard Nacional. Ele é chefe do setor de coordenação em saúde para a Infragard Metro de Nova York. É membro do Conselho Executivo do Cyber Working Group para a saúde e a coordenação em saúde. Ele foi chefe durante 10 anos do Escritório da Qualidade da Northwell Health, de toda a rede de saúde da Northwell, onde ele foi responsável por iniciativas sistêmicas de qualidade e segurança e também atuou como diretor médico interino nessa instituição. Antes disso, ele também tinha sido diretor médico no Hospital Universitário de Staten Island, em Nova York, e foi diretor de reumatologia dessa instituição de 1982 a 1999. Como reumatologista, ele teve uma vasta experiência em pesquisa e publicou artigos com temas de resposta imune no lúpus eritematoso sistêmico e também com temas de qualidade, segurança e cibersegurança em saúde. So, Dr. Jarrett, good afternoon. It's really nice to meet you, and it's a great honor to have such a powerhouse, such a large player in healthcare and patient safety here with us in the webinar today. I don't know if you're already able to hear us.
Okay. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, perfect, sir. Thank you.
Hopefully you can hear me. I'm going to first try and share my screen so you don't have to look at me the whole time. Hold on one second. Share. Oh. Let's get up the slides. And get the slideshow. Okay, so can you see my slides okay now?
Yes.
Someone nod a little yes? Okay, good, thank you. So first of all, it's an honor to speak to all of you. For those of you who speak English, don't feel stressed. I'm from Brooklyn, so it's like a wholly different language in the United States, from Brooklyn, New York. But I will try and keep my speed down to normal speed instead of typical fast Brooklyn. I hope all of you and your families are well, having all of us lived through the last 2 years of COVID. And unfortunately, COVID is not gone, and we will probably have to live with it for at least the next several years in some fashion. And in fact, in my role as Chief Quality Officer of the health system, the last 2 years, I kind of led the clinical efforts that we had in COVID for our health system. And that, quite frankly, is one of the reasons why I've kind of changed roles, because, as they say, it kind of burnt you out after a while. So right now, I'm advising on various aspects of quality and safety, as well as I also work a little bit with them on cybersecurity. So Northwell, a few words about Northwell. Northwell Health is a health system in the New York metropolitan area, New York City and Long Island and Westchester, the areas around New York. We're 23 hospitals, about 850 ambulatory sites. We have some nursing homes, long-term care facilities, home care, and about 11 years ago, we started a medical school. So we're really and we have a research institute that does, a huge amount of research. So we're the kind of a complete picture. And I know there may be some questions later on about, health systems and all that. But really what I want to talk today is about leadership, and culture. And I think that is the most critical thing, that we're going to talk about. I will tell you, when I give talks, what I like to do is I like to give examples of what we have done. Not that they're the best, but I think stories, just like patient stories, are always the best thing to do. So our CEO is Michael Dowling, who is a very interesting person, actually came from Ireland as a teenager, worked as a longshoreman in New York before he started college, to put himself through college, grew up in a stone hut without running water or a bathroom. And now is, the CEO of the largest private employer in all of New York State. We have 77,000 employees, and he has really changed, and it is really due to his leadership. And one thing he wrote that you see on this first slide is the development of leaders who really need to embrace change. During COVID, one of the things he said to us was, if you need to do something that doesn't fit the regulations, and New York State is a very highly regulated state, probably the most regulated state in healthcare in the United States. So if it doesn't match, but it's good for the patients, break the mold and go ahead and do it. And now, kind of post the horrible parts of COVID, it's getting back to what can we do that we did before that we realized we didn't need to do. We changed things. We didn't have to do certain things anymore because of the situation, and it didn't impact patient care not to do them. Well, what can we change? That's the challenge. You have to make change, and that's part of leadership. The other thing I'll say about leadership is everybody is a leader. Everybody is critical on the healthcare team. When I, lecture at the medical school and we talk about safety and quality, I always give the example that when we talk about Clostridia difficile in patients, and I say, who's the most important person to make sure that transmission is at its lowest in the healthcare team, they'll say the infectious disease doctor, they'll say the nurse, they'll say the primary doctor. And finally, somebody comes up with the right answer, which is the environmental worker or housekeeper who does the cleaning of the room after that patient leaves, so all those spores are gone and the next patient doesn't get C. diff. It's really about a team effort, and everybody has to lead. The other thing I would say is, we have a table of organization like every organization. We take it out every 3 years when the Joint Commission comes to do our regulatory visits. However, we put it away the rest of the time because our CEO believes in a matrixed organization, an organization where, yes, there is a reporting structure, but it's really about everybody working together. And in fact, if you go for a high-level job in our health system and have to interview with our CEO, and you ask him, well, who reports to me in this role? You basically don't get the job, because he doesn't believe that leadership involves, because people have to report to you, leadership is about setting the lead so that other people follow you and want to work with you. And I think that's a very important concept about leadership in general. I don't care what organization, it's healthcare, finance, or anything else, but it really is important and critical in healthcare. This slide is a little bit more pertaining to the United States, where healthcare has changed a lot. But I would point out a few things later on when you get a chance and look back at these slides, and certainly they can distribute these slides. I have no problem with it. One thing is the third bullet on the left, consumerism and transparency. The days are gone where the doctor said, this is what you do, and everybody just did it. And we certainly learned that with vaccinations during COVID. So consumerism and transparency is really important. And that requires the right culture, and we'll talk a little bit about culture in a few minutes. The other two things I want to point out is healthcare is changing very quickly. There is disruptive innovation, there are new technologies. Certainly in our health system, the number of telemedicine visits we did, telehealth visits we did during the lockdown of COVID that first spring in 2020, in April of 2020, we went up to several 100,000 per month, where before that, maybe we were doing 5,000 per month. Healthcare is changing and you have to be aware of that. And finally, a very important thing is the aging of the population. The population is changing, and therefore you have to be aware of that and prepare for that. And that not only involves the people we take care of, but quite frankly, that involves our workforce as well. So let's talk about a culture of excellence. This again loops back to leadership. It's a changing landscape. You must create an environment of continuous learning. Way back when our health system started really coming together and was building about 15 or 18 years ago, we developed a corporate education system to really educate everybody continuously. And that'll become back later when we talk about some things we do for teams. That is really important, that people need to learn. And, one of the things as leaders, it's not that you tell people what to do. It's really important that you teach them why they're doing it. And that's really important in quality and safety. If we all think about it, we have a million rules. We said, this is what you got to do here, there. People will do it if they understand why. But it requires the leaders, whether it's a nurse manager on a floor, the head of the pharmacy, to really teach people, okay? It's focused on leadership at all levels, not just senior management. And, be customer-centric. You really got to think about your patients, got to think about patients' families. You got to think about your workforce as customers, as a leader. And finally, communicate. You can't communicate enough. And even when you think you've done it the right way, it doesn't always work. If you've been reading the papers about what went on in the United States during COVID, unfortunately, with best of intentions, communications from our CDC and the FDA, yes, they changed because the science changed and knowledge changed, but they did not communicate in a really good way. And that confusion actually has led to problems in the number of people being vaccinated and all the uproar that you read about that goes on in the United States with this. So let's talk a little bit about culture and things like that, because this gets back again to leadership, because it's leadership that sets the tone. So humans make mistakes. It is just a reality of the world. There's no way to avoid it. We are going to make mistakes, and it's easy to look for mistakes. So I'm going to show you a slide and ask you a question, and you don't have to shout it out or put it in the Q&A. Just think about it quickly in your head or say it out loud to yourself when I ask the following question. So what is the name of the raised print that deaf people use? All right. And everybody's going to say Braille, because the Braille is the picture in front of you. All right. And deaf people don't use Braille because they don't need raised print. But that is the error we all make. This is part of the normal cognitive ways we think, the way our thinking processes work. So we can't always fault people for making errors, but we need to protect patients from these errors. And I'll get back to that in a little while. So when we think of culture of safety, the number one thing is leadership has to be committed to safety. They must do it. So I'm going to tell a little story for a second. When I was the chief medical officer over at one of our tertiary hospitals, one of our big hospitals, before I became chief quality officer, the last week before I left, one of our orthopedists, who was an excellent orthopedic surgeon, accidentally, in the middle of the night on New Year's Eve, pinned the wrong hip for a hip fracture. Okay, horrible thing to do. They all recognized it when they, turn the patient back on their back so they could, take the patient to the recovery room. And at that point, they went out and talked to the family. Of course, in the family, two of the children were lawyers and the third one was a physician. So, they understood, we're not happy, but explained. And then they went back in and pinned the correct hip. Patient did fine, obviously had a longer rehabilitation time. But we went back and when we did our analysis, it became clear that even though a timeout was done, the safety checklist was done, there was not engagement in it. When they said, we're doing the left hip, and they were actually, the right hip was prepped, and there were a whole series of errors that led up to this. And the right hip, everybody looked at it and said, yes, that's the correct hip, when it wasn't. All right. Now, this doctor was the type of doctor that if the nurses pointed out in the OR that he was about to pin the wrong hip, he would have taken them out for dinner for letting him know. This was not the type of surgeon who yells, screams, I know what I'm doing, etc. And in fact, he was so devastated by this. He was probably about 3-4 years from retirement. He retired 6 months later because he was so upset from this event. Now, the point of the story is what we felt is that our surgical safety checklists were not being done with the staff engaged in the OR. The anesthesiologist was busy doing one thing, the surgeon was, maybe doing something else. Nobody was really engaged. At that point, the quick fix was, because we didn't want an event like this to happen again, was during every single timeout for the safety checklist for the next 6 weeks till we got a better process in place, someone from outside the OR had to come in, the OR manager from that site had to come in and witness the timeout to make sure it was properly done and people were engaged. When we looked at the paper, timeouts were 100% of the time, the safety checklist, but clearly it was not being done the right way. Well, where am I getting to leadership? So one of our surgeons, another different surgeon, when we, and the CEO of the hospital, the head of the hospital, the head of nursing, and a couple of senior leaders went down to the ORs every day to make sure that people were doing what they were supposed to do. And we walked the ORs. CEO is down there, not a physician. And one of the physicians who brings a lot of big cases to the hospital, so many of you will know what I'm talking about. This is the person who, nobody wants to lose because they generate a lot of money for the hospital, and he was an excellent surgeon. He went to the CEO and said, this is baloney. I'm not having someone come in and do this. I've never operated on the wrong side. I'm not doing this. And he said it out in the hallway with other people listening. The CEO of the hospital, not of the whole system, but the CEO of the hospital, the head of the hospital, said to him, that's fine. Finish your cases today, but you can do your cases in some other hospital starting tomorrow. You were going to be off staff. He couldn't believe the head of the hospital said that. Needless to say, he did not pull his cases and he cooperated. But that is where the commitment to safety was demonstrated. The word that what had happened with that surgeon, who was known to be, a big surgeon in the hospital, spread like wildfire. And everybody cooperated 120% after that. There was not even a question that people were there. So you really need to get that leadership. It is really important to do. You need a fair and just culture, and we'll talk about it, and high reliability principles. So, part of leadership, and you can read this again, I don't like to read slides, but the last one I was like, is deference to expertise. Get the people who, leadership needs to make sure that the people who really know what the right answer is are the ones sitting at the table and giving that answer. If you have all leadership who aren't on the floors trying to make decisions and figure out things, it never works. You always have to get people who are really on the floors when you put groups together to look at a problem, get people, get nurses, get the housekeepers, get everybody involved. That is really important. And it requires, again, leadership to push it that way. And we'll talk about some of the ways you can do that later on. Healthcare, as we know, is very, very complicated. I always show up this slide because on the top left, it's your ability to pick the wrong thing off the electronic record because there are 35 things there. And we all click, mouse click the wrong thing every once in a while. And I always like the one on the top right, which I call my Christmas tree, ICU Christmas tree syndrome, where a patient's on 1,000 drips. Well, how easy is it for somebody to accidentally do something wrong with all those things hanging there? And you all know who work in quality and safety, reasons, principle that, you know, a trigger occurs, and then there can be distractions, variations, things wrong with the system. And eventually, when all the holes in the Swiss cheese line up, you get the undesired outcome. When you're correcting things, another thing that is leadership means, you know, we classify it in Northwell and a lot of other places under strong actions, intermediate actions, and weak actions. Weak actions are training, the favorite everybody used to have. Oh, we're going to put out a new policy. You know, we have 6,000 policies in Northwell. If you think anybody reads those 6,000 policies, except the people who write them, you know they're not doing it. So those are not going to really make changes. What you need to do is the stronger actions. You standardize equipment. And I showed on the last slide, you standardize, for example, on the bottom left was the concentration of solutions. So that way the same thing is always in the same concentration. You know, you may have physical changes. The best for that is what anesthesia did quite a number of years ago, the anesthesiologist, where, you know, if you go back to the 60s, anesthesia was dangerous. You know, 1 in 7,000 people died from anesthesia at that time. It was not a safe thing. You know, everybody used to talk about, well, I don't want an operation, it's dangerous. Well, that was a reason. Well, one of the things where sometimes people plug the oxygen hose from the anesthesia machine into the gas outlet in the wall. So what did they do? They made the oxygen a round one, and they made, and the plug round, and the gas square and square. So now you can't accidentally plug it in the wrong way. All right. You can really try, but it's really hard to do. That's the kind of things you need to really push in order to make sure that safety persists. Another area leadership has to really agree to is disclosure. Now, disclosure means, like with that problem with the patient I referred to before who had, you know, got pinned on the wrong side, coming out to the family and explaining what happened, talking to them, being open about it. Disclosure doesn't mean you have to say why it happened, because very often it's not one thing. And in this case, it wasn't one thing. They'd actually put the patient in a room that is usually not done for orthopedics. So they wheeled in a special table, but they put the table in reverse of the way it always is. So what normally would be left would be right. There were multiple things that were done that resulted, again, the Swiss cheese that I went into before. There were multiple things that went on, but you have to come out and talk about it. Now, you have to be sensible about it. If you accidentally give, you know, 2 acetaminophen tablets an hour late, that's not something you have to go and run to the family about. You want to correct it. I'm not saying it's the right thing to do. Use disclosure for things that really count. But again, disclosure has to have a process, and it means that you don't go to say what happened. You explain to the family something, you know, what happened in terms of what, but not why it happened. Excuse me, why it happened should be held off until you figure it out. The most important thing the families want to know is, are you going to correct this so it can't happen to somebody else? By and large, that's an important message families want. Another thing, closing loop, you need to measure effectiveness. We come up with a lot of solutions. You have to have a good measuring system, and I'm not going to get into that today. And finally, another thing is sustaining improvements. You know, we do a lot of things in quality and safety to improve processes. And if you go back a year or two later, people have developed workarounds, and they're actually doing it not the right way anymore because other things have come in. So you really need to look at that as well. You need to sustain the things. Now, we all talk about aviation, and aviation has a lot of safety factors, and it is true. They've really done it. The key in aviation is redundancy, so that if one system fails, there are other systems to back it up, and transparency. So we all know that there are black boxes on the airplanes, that if the airplane crashes, unfortunately, they go find it and they listen to the recordings. What you may not realize is, and I know this must occur in other places, but I know in North America, the major airlines all get together twice a year and review all the black box recordings from all the planes, thank God, that didn't crash, and look for near misses and talk about improvements. Also, you know, at least in the United States with the FAA, the Federal Aeronautics Administration, pilots are expected to come forward about mistakes that happen, even if it didn't obviously result in anything horrible. And they only get in trouble when they don't talk about what their mistakes were. If they talk about it and come forward with it, then they're protected. So we really need to do that. Now, it's interesting because I get back to where healthcare is changing. So, you know, we think about black boxes in airplanes. There actually is a company up in Toronto that actually we started working with. We were the first in the US to work with them, but now a number of major health systems are putting in, they're actually putting black boxes in the OR. We all think about it, the OR has kind of been a door closed, the surgeon runs it, and nobody thinks about it. And we made a decision with senior leadership that we're going to do it. It videotapes everybody. It's anonymous, so we cannot see, you know, we can't see, you know, who's saying what. You know, we can hear voices, but the voices are changed. It's a lot of technology involved, but it also maps the physiological data, what's going on in the room, the teamwork in the room, in addition to what's actually going on in either laparoscopic or robotic surgery through the digital camera. And this is all merged together, all right? And what that's going to result in is changes in the way we do things in the OR, very much like we never did before. But again, that required, when I brought it forward to my leadership, to make not only a financial commitment, but this was a cultural commitment, because let's face it, a lot of people don't want people looking at them while they're doing things. When they get to see the data, they're actually joyous about it. And people who didn't want to use this now want to use it because you can learn a lot. But it is really about changing things. And again, it gets to where we integrate technology in the right way so that we understand, you know, we can make major improvements. On the other hand, we have to be cautious. And I'll just bring this up because of some of the work I do with cyber. You know, artificial intelligence and machine learning is great. And everybody's saying, well, you know, we're going to have the, you know, the computers tell us, you know, make sure we do the right thing and all that. Recognizing that all these things work by algorithms. And if the algorithm was actually built wrong, then you're going to get the wrong answer somewhere along the line. So it's very important for the staff, again, to understand what they're doing and be trained and learn so that they have the knowledge that if it's saying something and it doesn't make sense, they raise their hand and say, stop the line. This doesn't make sense. I've got to go to somebody else and ask somebody else, an expert on this, what we should be doing. So we can't, you know, can't be totally dependent on the machine. One of the doctor in the United States, Dr. Wachter, who started the term hospitalist, he has a great quote that says, any doctor that can be replaced by a computer should be. I hope that translates well, because that is really something we have to think about. Highly reliable organizations, you know, we want error-free processes. And this is a journey to reliability. And you can look, there's a lot of stuff, and I have some references on my slides. And you can look at a lot of these things, but it's really about process design. You have to have the right processes, developing the right culture, and finally looking at human factors. And human factors are very important because, again, humans make mistakes. The B-29 bomber, which was very big in World War II, built by the United States, when they were testing it, they had a switch right in the middle of the cockpit dashboard that you can turn off the engine suddenly. Why? Many times those bombers were shot up over Germany or over Japan, and when they landed, they had to turn off the engines as soon as they got on the ground because they didn't want a fire to start. And so they really need to cut off. Well, unfortunately, a few times in the tests, people flicked that switch accidentally in midair, and that obviously was not a good thing to do. So you think about human factors. You want that switch, that simple switch, in a place you can get at it easily. And where it's easy to do. But you also have this problem that people are accidentally hitting. So they put a little cover over it that you just flip up. You've all seen those flip up covers, and it's got some red and yellow stripes on it so that it's rather obvious. It takes you less than a second to flip it up and then flip down the switch. But it prevents people from accidentally hitting that switch when all the other switches don't have that cover. That's human factor integration. All right. So let's talk a little bit more about culture, because culture comes from leadership. Right. And so, the United States does Joint Commission. I don't know whether your hospitals do that or you do DNV or who you do. But one thing we don't want is intimidating and disruptive behaviors. As I mentioned before, that one doctor said, "I'm not doing this," that didn't last. If we have doctors who are acting out, sometimes we want to make sure that they don't have anything going on in their personal lives, that, they're now drinking a lot, or they're on drugs, or they have psychological problems, because then they need to be treated like any other human being. But if it's just they have anger management problems, cannot be tolerated, because when it's tolerated, then people are afraid to speak up. So if your hospitals have residents, house staff, house doctors, and they call up the attending at 3 a.m. about something, if the attending starts yelling at them, the next time they're on at 3 o'clock in the morning and they see something, they're not going to call the attending when they probably should have. So you don't want it. That is very bad for safety. But again, it has to be that it's supported by leadership. So when I had to say a physician has to be terminated from staff and leave the hospital, even if they were a big shot doctor who wanted a lot of work or had a big name or been there a long time, but we had kind of gone through all the processes of trying to correct their behavior and nothing worked. I would go to to the very senior leadership and say, "This is what I'm doing." And they would say, "Yes, go ahead." Not, "Well, you got to make an exception. The finances of that institution are going to go down because they do a lot of surgery. Our competitors will take them." The best thing you can do is give somebody like that to your competitors. So just get them out and have, as leaders. All right. So you don't want intimidating behavior. And that includes when people are passive and they just are uncooperative, not having to yell and scream. All right. So these are examples, people, and I'm sure the nurses on this call have, certain doctors who you can page or call 14 times before they answer you, or even a house staff officer. You can't have that. All right. Condescending language, not appropriate. Impatience with questions. All questions are good. All right. Now, how do you get around this? We as a system, quite a number of years ago, probably about 15 years ago, adopted something called team steps. There are other mechanisms of doing this. There's crew resource management, which is like what airplanes use. There are even, in the United States, as big as NASCAR, which is, like Formula One, except it's regular cars, but it's a big Southern thing. But if you ever watch even a Formula One race, you watch a pit stop, everybody knows what their job is. Everybody knows what the process is. It is choreographed. Well, that's what should go on as a team on the hospital floors. It should be choreographed. Everybody knows what they're doing. So we adopted this methodology called team steps. Now, team steps actually was invented by the United States Navy. They developed it. Why did they develop it? Because of submarines. We have nuclear submarines. So basically, you got a nuclear bomb sitting on the back of your tin can when you're under 200 feet under the water. And who's watching this thing? You have 3 different shifts, 3 8-hour shifts of 18 and 19 and 20-year-olds who are your young sailors, who are most of the staff down there, most of the crew. They needed a way of getting them to communicate, address things as a team, be able to back each other up. And that's why they developed this team steps. And that's what's so nice about it. It's really a team. Now, what made it effective for us and changed culture and again came from leadership, is all of the clinical leadership. Anybody who was on the floors had to attend it, which means that the chairman of a department in the medical school, who was like the biggest big cheese around in that department, had to sit there with the nurses, with the housekeepers, with the clerk who sits at the desk on the unit. They all did this for 2 days, and everybody, had their turns over. It took like a year to go through everybody. They all had to sit together. Now, I don't want to tell you, clearly some of our senior physicians said, this is silly. I'm not doing this. We insisted, made it mandatory. And I will tell you, with very few exceptions, every one of them afterwards came back and said, this was really good. I actually enjoyed it. I really learned what other people thought of things, and it just changed the culture. Again, that kind of culture, teamwork, has to be driven by leadership. All right. So we're going to talk about building a safety culture. Most of you know what a driver diagram is. And again, I'm not going to go into all the details of this, but we were talking before about how do we get leaders to see. So one thing is something called patient safety rounds. This happens every Friday in all of our hospitals. And we actually started it in our ambulatory units as well, in our ambulatory offices. And it is a leader goes to a unit, and usually they'll have one unit for a month or 2 months, and then they'll go to a different unit. And what we do is we first discuss a problem in safety or quality and safety, and then we ask the staff from that unit, what do they see as safety issues? What do they see as problems? So it could be anything from, they may report, the whole front of the nurses' stations banged up because the way they have the panels, the beds are always hitting, it looks terrible. Or we can never get this supply when we need it. It's always short. We're always asking for more blankets. Anything like that. Or we have problems with the pumps. All right. Now, we put this in a database and we look for common problems, but all those problems had to be addressed. And within a week or two, that leader had to come back to that unit and say, here's how we're fixing it. Or quite frankly, sometimes there are problems we can't fix right away. We just can't do it. We'd like to do things, we just can't. They're not big safety things, they're nice things, but you got to tell them. It is that giving back the information and making them feel like you're listened and you're doing something with it is really the critical thing with this. And when I'm saying it's leadership doing this, I'm talking about in a given hospital, it would be the head of the hospital, the chief nurse, the medical director, chairs of departments would all each do these safety rounds, right? It wasn't just, a few people doing it. So they saw leadership, which was really, really critical. In addition, those of us who were in corporate, what we call shared services, who weren't fixed to one hospital, but oversaw for all the hospitals, would also take turns going in. So number one, we learned what was going on in the ground. But number two, they saw the leadership. We weren't just a picture on the website. We weren't somebody who signed a policy and therefore that's all they knew about us. It was really important to get us out there. And this was really a critical thing to do. I will tell you, and we'll talk a minute about the board of directors, but our board members very often also would sometimes just go to hospitals and make rounds and walk into floors. One of our chairmen of the board for about 5 years, one of them used to love to go on holidays. On Christmas Eve, he used to go in and go to a couple of the hospitals and talk to the staff on the floors and walk around. That's the commitment of leadership, which changes the culture of the institution. We also do something daily safety briefs. This is where we have a 15-minute call led by the leadership and the patient safety officer and the head of quality, and we go over what went on the day before, what's expected for that day and what do we expect the next day. So it might be that day, well, the CAT scan went down last night. It's not going to be ready again till noon. So a lot of the cases are backed up. What does this mean? You know, if there's an issue and a patient needs the CAT scan stat, where are we going to transfer them to? This is where things, and again, the management team, therefore, knows that they can communicate with leadership about this, all right? Now, here's another example of where I think, you know, leadership comes down. When I started 10 years ago in my role, it became obvious that every hospital does, by requirements, reviews every death in the hospital, all right? A few of them obviously were clearly problematic because of quality issues, safety issues, whatever, and they would get a full root cause analysis. But the majority of deaths, everybody would say, "I no major issues," and it'd be filed away in a file cabinet on a piece of paper and nobody ever looked at it. I looked at it and said, there's a lot to learn from every case. So I went to my leadership, explained that I wanted to centralize the process. It would take some of the burden off the hospitals, but it would allow us to gather data to really improve the care we're giving. I went to, you know, my the two leaders of the system, the chief executive officer as well as the chief operating officer, and hiring 7 full-time nurses to do this on a regular basis, and they agreed, and it has made a dramatic difference in our approach to mortality. Because even patients who we knew were coming in and might die on that admission, we found things that went wrong that may not have caused even that patient to die because of their primary illness. But the next 50-year-old who comes in, if that same safety factor happened, well, then that might cause a major problem. So we started this out back in, back in about 2014, 2013, 2014. The way we built the database is doing multiple reviews with staff through each of the hospitals, both medical staff and nursing staff, to get input. And now we have a database that has over 30,000 mortalities in it since that time, since 2012. This means that we can look at issues that may occur rarely, but because we're a large health system, we start to accumulate enough numbers that we can start to look for patterns where otherwise we'd have never seen patterns. And the reason I bring this up is because of the fact, again, it was a commitment by leadership that yes, one of our goals was, the least number of preventable mortalities. You can't prevent every death, obviously, but the least number of preventable mortalities, which ideally should be 0. Well, that's where they allowed us to approach it. And that's where leadership comes up. Another thing I'm just going to point out, many of you may do safety surveys. Again, the critical thing is, I don't believe you should do them every year, do them every 18 months, the minimum, because at the shortest interval, because you need to change things and then go back to the staff and show them what you changed to make things safer. They don't want to just do a survey. If you don't do things and give feedback to them and they see the changes, then quite frankly, the surveys are a waste of time. And this is more about, just culture. We'll get into it. You all know this. Patient safety is very hard. We see the safety events that are the tip of the event iceberg. The majority of the things are the near misses. You need reporting systems, and you need a culture where people will stand up and say, you know what, stop them, like the Toyotas, the old thing with
Ele parou para
Ele
mim.
travou para mim também, né? Eu acho que ele caiu. Vamos dar um tempinho para ele voltar.
Teu áudio está baixo, Rodrigo.
Será que é o canal, Nata?
Acho que é o canal. Mas dá para ouvir. As pessoas estão falando que está sem som.
conexão dele caiu, tá, Rodrigo?
Nós vamos aguardar um pouco, tá? O Dr. Jared retornar. Tem problema com a conexão, pessoal.
Eu não sei se todo mundo consegue me ouvir. Se eu estiver falando em outro canal, agora, como eu estou no canal do português, vocês devem estar escutando a tradução simultânea, daí vocês conseguem me ouvir, tá? Eu estava no outro canal off, então acho que é por isso que vocês não estavam conseguindo. A gente vai só aguardar ele voltar na conexão para retomar as atividades. Perfeito.
Só respondendo uma pergunta que teve no chat, não tem link para presença, tá?
I'm sorry. Sounds like I lost the my connection. So give me a second. I'm going to pull up the slides. Hold on one second. I just got to get the slides again. I went to a different computer. I don't know what happened there. So just give me a second. Never fails. Oh. Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes, perfect, sir.
All right. And is the slide up?
Not yet, no.
Not yet. Hold on 1 second. One second here. Let me just get this down. Let me hit the share screen 1 second. I apologize, everybody.
No worries, sir.
Oh,
Happens all the time with us as well.
yeah. Just got to get the permission here.
Júnior, você consegue dar permissão para ele compartilhar a tela nesse computador, nesse link?
Na verdade, pode ser alguma permissão do computador dele, tá?
Ah,
Ele estava compartilhando aquela hora.
Dr. Jared, if you want, I can share the screen. I think I have your presentation with me. Perhaps it's your computer there that's giving you a hard time sharing it.
Ele caiu de novo.
Ah, então.
All right. I should be back.
Yes.
I should be back now. Let's do the share screen. Share. There we are. You can see the slides now, right?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, thank you. I'm sorry. I'm back on another computer, so
We were on the iceberg slide, so.
Yeah. Let me get that. Just hold on 1 second. Hold on. Let me get back. We did that.
Yeah.
Okay. So thank you. I apologize. We don't have great internet here in New York City. The providers are not too great, so it goes down every once in a while. We realize that we all get on unhealthy norms. If you think about it, you're driving in your car and you come to a stop sign at 4 a.m, you stop. You get a little older, it's 4 a.m, no other cars, you kind of glide through the stop sign. You kind of don't really stop. That's the unhealthy habits we all develop. And then finally, what we don't want to allow is reckless conduct. And, I'm going to go for that and show, that there are three types of errors that occur in a just culture model. One's regular error where you kind of console, and learn and teach people. There's at-risk behavior when you're doing things like the gliding through the stop sign at 4 a.m. That's wrong. Again, you got to coach and learn. Don't allow it to continue. And then there's reckless behavior. So, if it's, human error, and this great slide showing somebody accidentally drove away with their gas nozzle in the car, you support the person. Remember, people who make mistakes often feel very, very bad. So it's not like, they're the secondary victims. You're driving when the speed limit's 25 miles per hour. I know it's not kilometers, I'm sorry. And you should be doing, and you're doing 35. Well, you got to kind of coach them. However, when somebody's driving while intoxicated, that's reckless behavior. So you don't want that. You don't want that to occur. So that's when disciplinary action is necessary. All right. And that disciplinary action, again, requires leadership to say it's necessary there, but not to look at, especially the one on the left, human error, and say people are at fault. Because generally when people make errors, it's because the system allowed them to make an error, not because of the fact that they wanted to make an error. All right. And this is from Lucian Leap, who's the founder of Patient Safety. People have to work in teams and respect each other, otherwise it's not going to work. And safety is everybody's job. It doesn't matter who does what. Safety is everybody's job. One of our housekeepers, in fact, was cleaning a room. He had been coming in every day, seeing the patient, talking to the patient, and he came in and the patient did not look right to him. And he immediately picked up the phone and called for a rapid response. Patient turned out was having a stroke, got treated for the stroke, actually recovered completely. But that was the housekeeper who saw themselves as part of the healthcare team and picked up the phone. Now, if you called a rapid response and it turned out the patient, maybe was sleepy from medicine or whatever, nobody would yell at that housekeeper. That's the important thing, all right? Because quality and safety is really hard to get at. You have to develop priorities, and that requires leadership, establishing those priorities, all right? That's really important. It can't just be, well, this is what we're doing, and that's why we're doing it, because that isn't the right thing to do. There has to be a sense of urgency, all right? And, I'll go to the first bullet, which is show numbers, but tell the stories too. But what numbers you show is important. So when we were first attacking the issue of central line infections and urinary tract infections from catheters in the hospital, first of all, I'm kind of older, so, much like many of my colleagues, well, we really can't get rid of central line infections. That's next to impossible. They just happen. Well, you can reduce them. And what we would do is, although there was a measure that was an index that came from Medicare, the government, that you had to hit in order not to get penalized. And if you're doing better than that, that sounded great. But we used at every single meeting the actual numerator, the number of people who had a central line infection. Of course, the key was that every one of those people, every one of those infections represents a human being, somebody's father, mother, grandparent, child, whatever, that shouldn't have had that infection. So it's really important you talk in terms of that, but also stories. When people present cases, they say, well, it's a 75-year-old person who comes in with diabetes and heart disease and this and that, and this is what happened. That's it. It's a 75-year-old retired teacher who still plays golf 5 days a week, who now comes in with so-and-so and so-and-so. And therefore, it changes the perspective of what you think about that patient. And the cost is the patient, the family, and as I said, the secondary victims are the care team. When something bad happens, it is important you get the care team. And then obviously it's a cost to reputation and finances, but the most important thing is the human cost. All right. And this is from IHI. You can read this on your own because there'll be plenty of time for questions and answer. This gets back to the board. All right. And where leadership has to have, so to speak, the guts, the courage to present things to the board. So every board meeting that we have, it starts with the patient's story. Now, generally, they're positive stories. However, on our board, that's the quality board, the quality meeting of the board, we present a case that was not good, that had system errors in it, all right? And why, therefore, the errors that occurred in that one place could occur everywhere else, and why we had to how we fixed it across the system. Now, some of the cases were not good cases, but the patients did fine. In some of the cases, the patients did very poorly because of this. And we still brought that to the board. Always have to put it in perspective. As a system, we might have 200,000 discharges from the hospital a year. This is the rare kind of case and rare kind of outcome. So we do well, but we still need to look at these things. And you need to get the board engaged. They need to feel that they're involved, and that's part of leadership as well, because the board obviously is concerned about the running of the hospitals, the operations, the finances, but they need to understand it's really about the patients. And they also have to understand that it's the team, and that if that patient didn't do well, by and large, it was not just because there was a human error. That was the trigger event. If we go way back to that slide early on, well, from James Reason, it's all the things in the system that did not work when all the holes aligned, so it wound up that the patient was harmed. All right. Again, you have to engage the whole staff, and leadership is very important. You have to have leadership that knows your institutions, knows your ambulatory sites. Most care occurs outside the hospital, knows all that, understands all that in order for the right care to go along. All right. And quality and safety need to be on every agenda. All right. You need to be thinking about it all the time. Whatever you do has unintended consequences that might affect quality and safety. And leadership has to understand that and lead that way, because if they don't, and they don't make this the highest priority, then nothing else works. Quality and safe care in the end is the most economical care. It works for the finances. It works for everything else. So it's really important to pay attention. Always being ready, not waiting for the regulatory agencies to come in. You have to always be ready. And here we use the Joint Commission, use other. And then leadership rounds, safety briefings. We talked about this. Another project we have is senior executive adopt a work unit, where actually, besides the safety rounds, each unit is assigned to a senior person either at the hospital level or perhaps at the corporate level, at the senior level of shared services, so that they have some place to go beyond their usual hierarchy and reporting structure. And that person's kind of responsible for it. And we take turns. It's like 3-4 months doing this, but we adopt a unit. And again, that gets leadership down on the ground, not sitting just in the C-suite, and people really therefore appreciate what's going on. All right. You need to transform care at the bedside. We talked about this, and that involves transformational leadership. Everybody's got to be involved. And, those are things you all know: communication models, rapid response, and then leadership rounding. Get them out there as much as you can. Safety briefings, non-punitive, brief. Those are the 15 minutes in the morning. Don't force people to do it. The way we did it at Northwell is our children's hospital started it first. And we thought it was so successful at one of our large quality meetings, which all the hospitals participated, we actually, it was timed out well that they had their briefing during that period of time. We actually played their 15-minute briefing for everybody, live on the telephone. So while they were doing their briefing, all the hospitals listened. We said, that's how they do it. Think about whether it'll help you. Within 3 months, every single hospital adopted it because they heard the real thing, not got a policy memo. Leadership didn't tell them you got to do this. We gave them the choice, and almost always everybody will do the right thing. All right. Prove reliability. We talked about adopting a work unit, how that goes. Again, that creates trust. You need to advocate for resources. That's really important as leaders. You may not, you have to go and have your return on investment. You have to say why it's going to be. There are some things that won't have it. And you have to then take a stand why it's important for quality and safety and how you can't afford not to have it. But most of the time, doing the right thing actually turns out to be financially better, but you got to present it. And again, accountability. And finally, getting dashboards so that people actually see the indicators, see what's going on, and we talk about the numbers. I think this is about engaging stakeholders. I think I'm going to stop at this point because I think there are a lot of slides. I'm going to say thank you. You can review the slides, and I'd be glad to take any questions anybody has. If I hopefully didn't lose half the people when my internet went down and I didn't put anybody to sleep.
Thank you very much, Dr. Jarrett. I'm very pleased to announce that we are in 330 people watching you and strong. And we were not at all disengaged in your presentation. With that, I would actually like to start with a round of questions. I took the liberty of translating the questions of the participants, Shirley. So if you don't mind, I could ask directly Dr. Jarrett in English. And I would like to start with the first question, Dr. Jarrett. Do universities in the US include on the curriculum of health majors subjects concerning quality and patient safety, risk management, and just culture? Is it already disseminated, or it's still very incipient?
In our health system, it's throughout, right from medical school on. And most of the medical schools are going that way. Now, our medical school actually teaches using clinical cases. We don't have multiple choice questions. They do a little bit of it because they got to do it for their boards to practice. But basically, all the exams and everything are all clinical cases, and in the clinical cases. So maybe they're learning about the kidney and about things about the kidney. We sometimes will throw in quality and safety issues into it as well. We give specific lectures as well on quality and safety in the first 2 years. And then we embed it in other areas as well. So it's really gotten through for, the medical students. Same thing for the nursing students, because we have a nursing school and the curriculum kind of parallels that, is very similar to that. So we've really tried to instill this because it really is, one of the main priorities for our health system. And just to give people an idea of why it becomes important. So for leadership at the hospital level, and I don't just mean a few leaders, I mean anybody with a vice president up, and also at the system level, we all get an incentive every year, a bonus, so to speak, based on performance. And there are five elements in the performance. And obviously, finance is there and a few others, but there are two: patient satisfaction, and there's a quality measure. Now, the way we do it at the hospital level is, if let's say you hit all your measures, you get, at the hospital level, you get 60% of your bonus, but 40% of your bonus is dependent on how the whole system does, all right? So what that does is it implies, and not only is everything important, but it requires sharing.
what I always say is, we put up numbers. If somebody's not doing well in one hospital, the people who are doing well are now feel the obligation to kind of say, how can I help you? Because it's in their best interest for everybody to do well. So that's one of the motivators we have that's kind of spread this out. And that applies to all leadership, whether it be nursing leadership, physician assistants, just administrators. So it kind of pushes that issue that we all have to work together.
Great, sir. Well, next question. How can we make real progress when it comes to making disclosure as an established practice in everyday life, in the office, in the hospitals?
Well, first of all, disclosure is not easy, all right, especially if it's a really bad case. I mean, I remember when I was chief medical officer, I met with 2 other people, with a mother of somebody who was young, where the hospital ever literally killed her son. I mean, there was no 2 ways about it. It was a system error. We changed things because of it, but it resulted in his death, and he wouldn't have died otherwise. And so you need to be trained in it. You need the right people doing it. In the United States, we have a lot, we have over 1 million lawyers in the United States, a lot of malpractice attorneys. There's a lot of lawsuits. So people always worry about, well, if you disclose, are you going to be sued? In reality, you probably get sued, and the literature seems to indicate you get sued less, because patients want you to be upfront. If you hide things, then they get angry. If you come forward, I mean, and you say, patient says, oh, I went to my pharmacy and they gave me the medicine, I started taking it, and then I realized you ordered the wrong medicine. If you go at that point and say, you're right, I'm looking to figure out how I made that error, I apologize, that patient will probably stay with you. If you try and hide it and say, well, it was the pharmacist error probably, or this happens every once in a while because I write 1,000 prescriptions a week, that's not the answer people want to hear. So you got to train people in disclosure. It's got to be done the right way. And, you don't have to explain all the details of what you found when you investigate. The most important thing you want to know is we put things in place so that this can't happen again. Now, if the family knows what happened exactly, because it's kind of obvious, then you may want to give a little bit more specifics. But it's a matter of training people how to do it. But people want to know when things went wrong, why did they go wrong? Now, you got to use some sense about it, in the sense, again, you don't want to pick on minuscule things, because then 1,000 little things or near misses or go wrong sometimes. You don't want to keep running to them every second. And if it really didn't have an impact on somebody who was, unfortunately terminal, and it really didn't, cause their death at all, and, it was an error that shouldn't have happened, but, they were dying the next day. They were dying anyway, and were going to die the next day, and they still died the next day. Use a little sense about family and compassion, that you don't want to all of a sudden set expectations which weren't there. That's rare, but I just say you got to think about it. But whenever you're in doubt, better to talk to people and disclose things than not to, because the truth always comes out. But again, at 4 a.m, you don't want your junior house officer explaining what went wrong. You want the attending, who knows the patient, to talk to the family or to the patient. That's the best way it should happen, because if they do it that way, there's a relationship there. And quite frankly, the junior house officer may not always present it in the best way. And, disclosure is good if you do it the right way. If you do it the wrong way, it's maybe more harmful to the family and more disturbing. So you want to do it the right way.
Perfect, sir. Okay, so moving on your experience, what would you consider the key components of a strong safety culture?
The strongest is really, it's always about the patient. Okay, that's number one. That's what we're there for. It's about the patient, not us. And number two, it's freedom to speak up, ability to, if you think something's wrong, to say something. And the last, I would say, or the last two are communication. And unfortunately, we live in a world where everybody texts and emails and everything. And I keep trying to tell people, pick up the phone and talk, because it's a lot faster and it's a lot cleaner. And you really, or go talk to them in person. When we do, you want to do sign out rounds or transfer patients and things like that in person, because you want that human interaction. Now, human interaction's gone down over the last 2 years because everybody's wearing a face mask all the time. But the reality is, when you're looking at people, you can pick up something about their tone or their hesitancy and say, well, tell me a little more about that. That is important. And then the last thing is just teamwork. People have to work together as a team. This is a team sport, and we have to support each other, not pick on each other, and really figure out how we can help each other. And that really is the critical things for safety. And then finally, overarching all that is that leadership has to believe quality and safety are, so to speak, as they used to say in Ford, with Ford cars, is job number one. All right. Quality and safety is the most important thing, because if we don't do that, then what are we doing?
Okay, that's great. Okay, so as you know, we are currently in IDOR here, with 67 hospitals and counting in 13 states, and we have hospitals in very diverse stages of maturity in management. So naturally, we struggle when it comes to the perception of non-punitive response to errors. That's an issue that we have, and it's pretty much in every questionnaire that we apply to the teams. The lowest score is when it comes to punitive response to errors. And what would you consider like, how high do we have to aim to engage leaders? Like, which rank of leadership do we actually have to engage? Does need to be engaged? And which measures would you consider the most effective to change both leaders and the people on the front line perceptions on punitive response to errors?
Well, all leaders have to learn that, you can't have a punitive approach to errors. Again, if it's reckless behavior, that's different. But if it's not reckless behavior, it's just got to become the culture. And, we as we've absorbed hospitals, we're obviously not as big as you are, but as we've absorbed hospitals over the years, it becomes obvious sometimes that some leaders, they don't fit the culture. And then you got to make a change, because all it takes is one person to kind of poison the well. The people above them may not notice it, but everybody below them, they know that. So, it really requires, the senior leadership from your system level to go and meet with people and say, this is the way we're doing it. This is what we believe. This is our culture. Now, I will tell you, the two things we always get on our safety things is also punitive. As much as we do this, we're much better than we were, and we're way up on the much better percentile than we were. But they always get, and the other thing is there's never enough staff. That's the other one. And that's now clearly, since COVID, is much worse, because terrible workforce issues in the United States, especially with nursing, terrible workforce issues in terms of getting enough staff. But you really need it. And again, it gets down to what I said before with the example with the that of the hospital and that one surgeon. Sometimes you need it even on an administrative level, that, what, this person culturally is not fitting. They may be a good person, let them go somewhere else. We're going to change it. And that's the way you change the culture. Growing up in New York, where the mob was always a big thing. If you watch The Godfather, you make an example. I hate to say it, but you make an example. And when you make an example, everybody else goes, yeah. Now, you don't have to do that in a bad way. You can just say, and then when that person leaves, then you really hear about all the things, because then it always goes beyond the culture and punitive things. Then there are 1,000 other things wrong. but that's the way you got to do it because you can't tolerate leaders. We're doing it. Now on the staff side of it, not the quote unquote clear leadership side, but the staff, the regular rest of the employees, they have to see it because if they see they're not getting punished for things, and again, this culture of it's the system issue. We know you're going to make an error. We don't want you to make errors. If you keep making errors, that's not a good thing. You know, not everybody does a good job. I mean, unfortunately, so sometimes people can't say, but if they see it, they'll very quickly learn it, but it takes a long time to change it. And as I said, all you need is one person, you know, who makes a remark or carries this forward, that it's a problem. On the other hand, you know, the staff is usually very happy if there's a staff member who keeps doing things wrong, no matter how much you counsel them, and you move them out of there. Because otherwise they keep going, I do all the right things, this one doesn't, they get away with it. So again, you look at it. I mean, and it's hard. It's very hard. It took years to change our culture, especially with new hospitals. Because one of the problems with new hospitals is their culture is also built around their community. And you can't go in and just blow it up because then they hate you. And so they have community norms that you have to deal with, and you have to kind of figure that out over time. So it's not going to be an instant thing.
Well, I have another question, and that's a more broad question. It's regarding cost effectiveness of rehabilitation centers and the long-term facilities that you have on your network. I was dying to make that one. So what is it like in your network, on your healthcare network? Do long-term facilities and rehabilitation centers, do they break even? Or if they do break even, cost effectively speaking, they do so by themselves, or only when you consider the whole value chain of the patient and the whole process? And was it introduced as a premise in the network, or did it take some convincing to be implemented in Northwell? How was your experience?
It really, it was recognized, you know, some of the things we do, like long-term care or rehab units, it's really where it fits in the value chain. And therefore there were conscious decisions to build it up. If you have patients that are stuck in a hospital that could do well in a rehab unit, even if you lose a little on the rehab side, you freed up a bed. And I don't know how it is in many of your institutions, but most of our hospitals every morning, they're dealing with 30 or 40 patients sitting in the emergency room waiting for a bed. So obviously that's not the best for care, certainly isn't the most comfortable for patients, and it doesn't lead to great patient satisfaction. So you want to get them out. It's not very efficient to do it. I mean, hospitals don't run efficiently when they're at 105% occupancy, because then everybody's waiting for the tests. So if you can move people out to another level of care that will provide what they need, but it isn't in the hospital, it actually economically makes more sense, as well as reputation, et cetera. So, as part of a system, you have to look at the big picture of the patient and not just focus on, well, this cost center is costing us and therefore it's no good and we should shut it down. Now, sometimes you also do things that are cost centers that you don't make money on because it's the right thing to do. So, for example, a lot of hospitals have cut back on their inpatient psychiatry units in New York because the reimbursement rate, the payment rates are horrible. All right. We have not done that. And we have not done it because we feel it's not right for the communities. So it does lose money for us. But we look at it, that's what we got to do because the communities need it. There's no place else to go. And it's the right, and as long as we're making a margin somewhere else, it fills in that way. So in that case, it doesn't fit the value chain in terms of, money, but it does fit the community chain of what we're delivering to the community. So sometimes you got to do that. And that again comes from senior leadership deciding it's the right thing to do. But, you know, things like long-term care, rehabs, things, yes, it pays to do it because you're saving in the long run. And quite frankly, it saved us during COVID because we had a place to put our patients recovering from COVID who still were, especially in the first spring of 2020, we didn't know how long they could, you know, before they could go home. It gave us a place to put patients and free up our hospitals, which were being stretched beyond belief. So, you know, it does have value, but it has value even in regular circumstances. So that's how you kind of have to look at it.
Yes. Okay, back to quality and patient safety. Could you give us some examples on how technological tools can help build up a safety culture in a hospital and in an institution?
Sure. So, I mean, one of the things, obviously, one of the biggest boons to healthcare has been in the electronic medical record. Now, it's a boon and it's also a problem. It's a boon because nobody now, pharmacists, nurses, don't have to read doctors' handwritings anymore. They can read what the order is and all that. It also means you have a way of tracking things, getting data. All those things are good. Bad things with it, and this is what the give and take you have to look at. People make mistakes, as I said before, clicking the wrong thing. Also, people tend to copy and paste everything that happened before and put it in without looking to see if it really happened. Okay. So there's pluses and minuses. You know, standardized library in an IV pump, that's been great. It has guardrails on it, so people don't give too much medication. It gives the right dosages. Things like that make a big difference. I think other technology is in terms of monitoring. Okay. And that's going to be less in the hospital and more about home monitoring. You know, we can send people home now where we can easily measure their pulse ox, you know, even with COVID, send them home earlier because we can measure their pulse ox, measure things, and all that can be downloaded where it couldn't be before. So I think that I think the big break with technology is going to be the use of artificial intelligence and machine learning, not to tell us what to do, as I said, but to keep us again with the guardrails and remind us when we're forgetting about something. Cognitive errors are very common. You know, if you see 3 cases of something in the emergency room, the 4th case, even if it's not that, you're going to think it's that if it looks similar. All right. And you're going to immediately not think about what the real differential diagnosis. So having a process that gives you a differential diagnosis helps. In the emergency rooms now, we use early warning systems about sepsis so that we don't accidentally forget someone might have sepsis. If certain factors between the lab or the vital signs come in, it asks the question, do you think this patient has sepsis? Because if you miss it, the patient can die easily. So that is where I think technology is making the big difference that we're seeing. I think one must remember it's an adjuvant. And one thing I would say to all the care providers here, despite all the technology, despite all the computers, don't forget to actually touch the patient, examine the patient, ask the patient questions. Don't depend on what forms they filled out completely. Healthcare is not just a science, it's a human art. And you find out more that way. You know, getting texts or getting emails from a patient are great. But I remember when I started getting in my practice emails from patients, I thought back about the patients that would call me up instead. And they may call me about one problem, but I'm hearing them sound a little short of breath on the phone. And then I go into it. Yeah, you know, I'm a rheumatologist, so I worried about their rheumatoid arthritis, but that was fine. It was clear they were going into heart failure. that's where at this point technology can't do it and we need to do it. So I think you have to balance the two. The biggest thing about technology now is we have a huge amount of data. Of course, we don't know what to do with all that data, and that's what we have to learn, but it gives us the possibilities that we never had before. And I think that is going to be, I think that will transform medicine over the next 10 years.
Yes, yes. And actually, regarding the copy-paste thing, we had to develop some security measures to prevent people from copy-pasting everything in the electronic charts. So it's a, yeah, it's an overall.
And then if anybody asks for a printed out copy of the chart, a 2-day stay is 3,000 pages long.
Yeah, exactly.
Not very green to print it out.
Well, we have another question. When it comes to conditioning people to think on how, more importantly than the what, you see the value of an assertive communication and trying to make that change and trying to make things just turn this key, so to speak. And how would you do that? How would you approach the staff and the leaders in making this change, this mindset adjustment, so to speak?
Two ways. One, I would ask the answer you came up with. If you were going in the hospital and having that situation now happen to you, would you be happy with that answer? And number two is, I play the child, the 3-year-old game. Say, why? And they tell me this, and I say, well, why? And make people get used to thinking further and further in. They just, they get it, and and we always look for the short answer, but it's hard, and you got to really get down to the why it happened. And using things like fishbone diagrams and things like that, looking at the environmental versus staffing, use those tools, because those tools make people think about things. People may not think, well, was staffing right on the floor? All right. Was it a change of shift? That when you put these things in to the equation, then people start to really delve into it. So you have to you try and get them to feel like they're a detective. That's the way I used to do it. You're the detective, and it's what happened, and that's how you got to do it. And then you ask why. Just tell people why. Yes,
people need to be enticed, right?
Yeah.
Perfect. And I have another curiosity question, if you may. I don't mean to put you on the spot, but how is it like the clinical pharmacy in an outpatient condition and facilities? Does the clinical pharmacy that in your network, does it work more in the inpatient situation, or is it linked to the outpatient and rehabilitation centers? Because we have a lot of difficulty in medication reconciliation and just monitoring antibiotic use in the outpatient, in outpatients. And when it comes to inpatients, we are further advanced, but in an outpatient situation, that's still a challenge for us. So
it is a very much of a challenge. As you know, the United States has a very fragmented healthcare system. So, especially when you get to seniors, older people who are on Medicare, they may get drug X at one company at CVS pharmacy, and drug Y at Walgreens, and drug D in the third drug from their mail away, because it's different prices. And therefore it becomes very hard to do. On the outpatient side, what I used to do in my office once in a while is I'd have a brown bag day. I give them all a little brown bag. Sometimes they need a bigger brown bag. I say, bring in all your medicines from your medicine cabinet, and then go through the medicines with them for 10 minutes one day. And that would be how I do the medication reconciliation. But quite frankly, it's still not great. And that's because there's not a single database that has all of your medicines. And it's a problem. On the inpatient side, it's easier. But even on the inpatient, when patients come in the hospital, half of them don't know what they're on. Family members don't know what they're on. some older people or even younger people have no concept. So it's still a difficult problem even for us. And it's made worse because people shop around for their pills.
Yes. Okay, so I have a couple more questions. If you are you still available? How's your time?
Another 5 minutes or so, if that's okay.
Okay. So we have another question from Gabriela. She said that, I'm sorry, that's not actually a question. I'm gonna, if you consider the human errors and human error, how could you, I'm sorry, so just a second. It's a very extensive question.
Okay.
Okay, so Gabrielle is asking basically, how could we review the data on mortality to have a better comprehension of which cases, which deaths and occurrences of death are linked to a human error or linked to a system error, and which ones could be reviewed in such a lens. Did I make myself clear?
Yeah, I think you made something clear. So when we do any root cause analysis now, any analysis of a quality case, whether the patient died or didn't die, as I said, we use, the fishbone approach with, environment, staffing, etc. We now have a bone on the fishbone for cognitive errors. And we think about anchoring, heuristics, all the things that people do cognitively that they make an error in. And we've tried to train our quality staff in that area so they understand the human factors, and therefore they can analyze it and look and see. And it's not, I would say 2/3 of the cases have some cognitive error in it. Doesn't mean it's the main cause. But again, then you start looking for patterns and say, well, if we're having that cognitive error frequently, even if it's not a major cause, at one point it is going to cause something major. How do we correct it? How do we get, how to get it? And, what's really good sometimes, especially, if you're associated with universities, is you get somebody from the psychology department who deals with human factors, and we got actually industrial engineers in and work with us to teach us about human factors so that we can look at that aspect, because it's an area that has been neglected in healthcare up until recently, and it is really kind of critical.
Perfect. Thank you, sir. Gabriela, I hope I hope I asked your question correctly. So I would really like to thank you for participating today. I think we had a great feedback, even though in Portuguese, but we have great feedback from everybody who's watching us. And I was informed also that the number of participants is even larger because we have some auditoriums in our hospitals that are just filled with people just watching us. So I would really like to thank you for participating today. It was an amazing lecture, sir. Thank you very much.
It was my honor to do it. I hope you all learned something, and you all do great work every day, as we all try to do in healthcare. That's what it's all about. And thank you, and you should all stay safe.
Thank you, sir. So, Ana Cláudia, com a palavra, muito obrigado e boa tarde a todos.
Obrigada, Dr. Jared. Foi um prazer ter essas 2 horas aqui com o senhor, preciosas, discussões riquíssimas. Quero agradecer a todos pela presença, por estarem aqui conosco ainda logados. A gente sabe do desafio, né, do dia a dia, e também para quem está nos auditórios aí nos assistindo. Obrigada também. Quero deixar aí uma mensagem para vocês, né, que vocês, todos nós, profissionais de saúde, não só a enfermagem, que a gente continue aí com foco nesse propósito, que é o cuidado do paciente, né, sempre com segurança. Então, obrigada mais uma vez, uma boa tarde a todos, e continuem com a gente nas programações locais e também na próxima webinar aí que teremos no dia 19 de maio, será aí para todos da empresa. Uma boa tarde, um abraço e até a próxima. Obrigada, Rodrigo, obrigada ao IDOR, mais uma vez pela parceria de sempre. A doutora Elidea Lima está aí se deslocando, mas estava conosco, então obrigada aí por esse time aí que sempre faz um sucesso nesses encontros. Até a próxima.